Guys, huh? I'm pretty sure he'll turn it back on after.
Yeah, we got a few more raids to do. A little bit of Path of Exile to enjoy. I'm a Path of
Oh,
Exile enjoyer
what
too.
level are you in Path of Exile?
I'm 93 right now, my guy.
What?
Yeah, like when I say I really enjoy Path of Exile, I mean I was playing it before I played Lost Ark. So now,
Bro.
with another fantastic sequel out, it's been a lot of fun.
I'm like 84. It's actually my first time playing it. It's the only thing that I want to play right now, bro.
Yeah, I feel you on that. It's so much fun.
God damn, man.
Okay.
All right, here we go again, guys. You guys already know this. We always start with the shout out. We have Pennyfeather here. He's gonna be giving an interview, a guide on Sharpshooter. That's his main, and he's gonna cover the topics, and then Q&A afterwards. Huh? You guys already know the drill. And here
Absolutely.
it is.
Thanks so much, everybody. Yeah, my name is Pennyfeather, and I consider myself through and through a Death Strike Sharpshooter main. I've been playing this since the very early days in Pride Home, and I've never swapped off. It's a true love of mine, and I'm happy to share it with you guys here today. Okay, so I suppose we probably want to start off with a brief overview of, what Sharpshooter is, maybe why I'm drawn to it, and then we can get into some of the specifics of how it plays, especially here in Tier 4. There's some really cool adjustments and changes in quality of life that we got to make it a really effective class. I think anybody should give a try if it's interesting to them. And interesting is a pretty easy thing for me. It's the bow. This is the bow class in Lost Ark, and if you have a bow class in your game, the chances are I'm at least going to give it a try. It's what sold me even before I saw any of the skills cast, and then when I saw the skills cast, that was an even easier sell. So, when we're thinking about Sharpshooter, it's a non-positional Hitmaster class in Lost Ark that is able to do a lot of its damage effectively from range, almost at any time that the boss can be damaged. This makes it a really attractive pick for people that like to position their character well and do damage constantly, while also being a reliable force to contribute to mechanics. It's not the most attractive or desired class. It's still quite a minority pick, I'd say, for most people in the rosters, but it's something that I mean, I have 15 of them across different regions in Lost Ark, so to say I love it would be an understatement. So
A lot of people play low key. A lot of people play low key.
yeah, it's a lot more now
Yeah,
because I mean,
now,
talk
yeah.
about the history.
Right,
It
right,
used to be
100%.
frowned upon. I often joke about this with my chat and my community.
Yeah.
When I was trying to find a group for hard Vaulton way back in the day, after my initial group of friends quit, I was accepted into a lobby. Somebody, I kid you not, said, "Why are we accepting a sharpshooter?" And then I was promptly kicked from the lobby. And that general sentiment definitely existed back when people didn't understand how the game worked, or you saw too many people underperform on a certain class, and
Right.
it was never a true star. There's a very small window where it was considered the most busted class in the spec loyal companion rework days, but most of the time it's just considered a strong pick, above average when played well. Okay, let's get into it then, starting with Death Strike. I can talk to Loyal Companion a substantial amount as well at the end of this discussion too. But for me, it's always going to be a Death Strike angle for what I personally like to play. For one main reason, I like to do a lot of damage with my spells. And I like those spells to be cast constantly, and I like the idea of cycling in and weaving spells to accomplish that. While there are similarities with Loyal Companion, in fact, there's a lot of similarities between the two specs, it is the fact that at this time, when played well, similar gear, similar scaling, the Death Strike variation of Sharpshooter does a pretty substantial amount more damage in most encounters in Lost Ark. And since I always played it before, there's no reason for me to swap now, or to be honest, even when Loyal Companion was stronger for about a 6-month period, I still didn't swap. I enjoyed playing Death Strike much more because of the playstyle,
True,
which we'll
man.
talk about. As it has changed quite a bit in Tier 4. There's a pretty big shift. I think it's for the better, and I actually still play a bunch of early Tier 4 sharpshooters as well, so we can talk about those differences. Let's start with the tree then. If we're thinking about arc passive in Tier 4, you got to start with the evolution tree. This is where so much of the power comes, and when we think about sharpshooter, it's actually an extremely flexible class in terms of the different ways that you're able to build it. It's always been this way. There were many possible builds in Tier 3. People would often laugh at me. But again,
Right.
when I say many possible builds,
Right.
I mean many possible builds.
What?
I
You
had
got
I
10?
had 10 presets on my main for experimentation that I used to want to do with different sets of accessories. Now in tier 4, obviously it's so much more simple because we can do everything from one tree. And one of the ways that I like to play, I'll talk through that first and foremost, is completely self-sufficient. Nobody wants to give a crit synergy to a sharpshooter.
Yeah.
Make sure that I'm the most consistent player that I can be when I enter a raid. That's going to be this build, looking for a 100% crit rate while performing in as consistent a way as possible. That means that depending on where your other crit sources are coming from, like your bracelet and your party synergies and your rings, your goal when I play sharpshooter is to reach 100% crit rate. I don't like seeing white numbers and I don't like to gamble. So what I do is I try to make sure that I'm reaching 100% crit rate when I'm using adrenaline, or just below that if I'm looking for the very smallest of gamble. In tier 3, my main sharpshooter had 98.49% crit rate, and if I ever saw a white snipe, it was a very sad moment. As you can see, it's similar things here, and the way we accomplish that is by dumping most of our stats into crit. I say most, and I can't give you a specific number, because as I mentioned, it's going to depend on
On
the
your
rest of
bracelet.
your gear and what you have in order to hit that crit rate margin. If you're going for self-reliant, you're looking for 86% if you're using legendary adrenaline. The rest of your points, you dump those into spec. And as a basic rule of thumb, whatever you do, whatever you change regarding crit rate, when you have more crit that you can take away from this spot, you're going to be putting that into spec for Death Strike Sharpshooter these days. At least that's how I play. Like I said, Sharpshooter is a flexible class. There's variations of Death Strike that play a lot more Swift. In fact, in Tier 3, I used to play Crit Swift instead of Crit Spec. But for one big reason we'll get to in the Enlightenment tree, Spec is favored now because of the power of our Identity spell and how effective it is in Tier 4. Regardless, if you just remember that golden rule about Sharpshooter, fix your crit rate first, dump the rest into your secondary, you know you'll be in a good spot. So for me, in this self-reliant build, I personally choose to take 2 points in Keen Sense and forego damage and limit break because I want to get the attack speed in the third row on Destruction Charger. I take Keen Sense to finish off the crit rate to where I want it. And again, this is the self-reliant, not looking to necessarily do the absolute most damage ever, but looking to always crit build. As for the fourth row, I personally rely heavily on trying to position effectively to do damage, so I take Standing Striker, because while we don't have a lot of paralysis immunity, and we have even less push immunity, positioning well enough that your spells don't get interrupted from range is a core part of playing Sharpshooter well, and it's what I rely on. Mana Forge is not an option, or MP Furnace, my apologies, is not an option, because our identity is actually, in Tier 4 at 1680, our highest damage dealer, even more than Snipe. The other options in fighting, again, not really something that we prefer, and Supersonic Breakthrough, not something that we're able to maximize on Sharpshooter. The only other real option would be Blunt Thorn. And as I said before, I don't like to gamble. I
Yeah.
hate this node. You're not going to catch me dead using this unless you tell me that it does 40% more than what I'm already doing some of the time. Because if I can do, you know, 15% less damage, but I'm doing it all the time,
Yeah.
I'll be very frank, I prefer that. So while there's a variation of Sharpshooter that can run Blunt Thorn, I do not believe it is the one I'd suggest for most people looking to maximize their damage, especially because so much damage is loaded in a couple of spells. With that said, when we're thinking about the evolution tree that I use for no crit sins, it does change a bit when I think about playing with crit synergies. You'll see that if I'm playing with one crit sin, I adjust my crit rate in spec and remove points from Keen Sense to take more points in Limit Break, but the rest remains the same. And if I am in the luxurious snuff situation to be playing with two crit synergies, then I'm able to drop Keen Sense entirely and take even
Wow.
more attack speed and Destruction Charger while still maintaining, again, that 100% crit rate if we're thinking about Adrenaline and 220% crit sins added on.
Right.
Now,
Wow.
I gotta have some pretty significant trust in those
Yeah.
crit synergy players to make sure they have the uptime at this point.
Yeah.
But it's again, it's what you're looking for if you're trying to push for that maximum damage in the evolution tree. At least, again, maximum consistent damage. You can see very high highs if you play Blunt Thorn Sharpshooter, but when your lows go as low as 20% lower than the consistent version, I'll take the consistent version any day.
This is some
Okay.
tryhard stuff, guys. This is another level set. Diablo.
Yeah, I mean, again, most people, and I'll say on my other sharpshooters, you're not going to see me with this many presets in my arc passive. I don't have
Damn,
that
bro,
many.
what?
Usually, I'll just move a few points from Keen Sense and Limit Break around and adjust the first row. Typically, I don't need to change that much, but hey, that's the beauty of the arc passive system. You can change it fluently and freely if you want to adjust to your situation. And like I said, this isn't new to me. I used to do this in Tier 3 using a Swift Ring or a different bracelet in order to reach different breakpoints, in order to make sure I was hitting the crit rate first. That's always my priority, and then moving on from there. We'll talk later about why crit rate is so important, but the short answer is we have a lot of crit damage in our spells. Focusing still on arc passive for now. If we head over to the Enlightenment tree, I have the wrong page on, so my accessories are
Messed up.
broken right now. We'll swap back. And there, that looks a little prettier. In the Enlightenment tree for Death Strike Sharpshooter, like many classes, a lot of our Tier 3 power comes in the first 3 nodes, and to talk through what they are, we're getting extra damage when our Silver Hawk, our identity bird friend, is not summoned. We're getting extra Hawk meter every time we choose to summon and destroy or attack with the bird. It refunds to 50%. And Final Mark is the old Death Strike buff, that's the old name Death Strike, in which when we hit a target with our Hawk attack, we're able to amplify the damage it takes for 8 seconds. And this is a big deal because previously, sharpshooters that played Death Strike would have that 8-second window to try to get as much damage as they could in, and then they'd build for the next time they'd apply that 8-second buff. This is very different in Tier 4, and we'll take a look at that shortly. For now, though, if we're looking at the 1660 arc passive setting, again, this is the minimum that you'd be looking for, and when you fully refine your relic accessories, you can get some extra crit damage every time you cast your bird attack, your Silverhawk assault, or in this case at 1660, last rush. And if you're somebody that's more frugal and looking to not use mana food, which I'll tell you I am the opposite of that, I will use mana food every drop of the hat if it means I get to do more damage, I choose to put 2 points here on my 1660s most of the time. If I'm worried about the uptime of my support and their mana buff that they're providing, then I'll put 1 point in MP recovery, as this is going to restore 10% every time you cast your bird attack. This is a gigantic quality of life. A lot of people thought that the biggest problem with Sharpshooter was its mana consumption when playing Death Strike or Loyal Companion.
Right.
So this is a big assistance to maintaining that mana pool and affording you not to have to use mana food if you'd like. Again, though, in my opinion, a 4% extra crit damage point, that's like an entire ring roll. I'd prefer to have that when I can. When I play on my main, this is what it looks like. Now, the key thing about playing at 1660 and 1680 Sharpshooter is that the Tier 4 node, Level 4 node, is really substantial in terms of how much it changes gameplay. I was worried at first that I actually wouldn't like this. And I think it's actually important that we step into Trixion to take a look at what I'm talking about. It's different enough that they call the spell completely different things. In Tier 3 and before, we had Last Rush, an attack where your sharpshooter grabs the bird effectively with his hand and throws it forward after it's summoned. So I'm going to summon it with my Z activation, and there's our friend flying above us. And if I use X to throw it away, a long skill shot has the bird flying ahead to hit the first target, detonating in a medium-sized area and applying the Death Strike mark. Once more. If we take a look at that in Tier 4, with the 1680 variant applied, we now get Silver Hawk Assault. This does a lot of key things to make Sharpshooter an even more powerful class, in my opinion. And again, like I said, I was scared at first, and the biggest fear we had is that the old Last Rush attack you just saw also gave us push immunity. It was a really powerful tool in the toolbox of any skilled sharpshooter to use that spell frequently to push immune boss attacks that would knock you out of position to use your other non-paralysis immune spells. In Tier 4, we don't have this anymore. But instead, we get, similar to Scouter, a non-GCD long-range skill shot that can be cast while casting any other spell. This is the moment I was sold.
What?
I can be charging my snipe while using my identity buff, which is still
Bro.
applying all the effects of Last Rust previously, but now can be cast while doing anything else. This unlocks so much freedom of positioning, of casting our other spells that we'll get to, and perhaps even more importantly, layering damage with multiple casts at the same time. Because while once upon a time, Sharpshooter was about waiting for that next Death Strike window to be available, now you'll see we're all about chaining as many Silverhawk Assault casts or Last Rush casts together in the main variant, the most common meta variant of the Sharpshooter build today. To demonstrate that quickly again, when actually attacking the boss, again, I can be casting my other spells, and I can even be casting a spell that generates meter, and have the meter continue to generate while I'm casting. It's an incredibly beautiful thing that we'll get into in a little bit more detail, but when we're thinking about why Sharpshooter is strong in Tier 4, Silverhawk Assault for Death Strike is definitely it. Okay, taking a look at the last Arc passive tree then, the Leap tree, this one has a little bit of preference that you could apply to it, as our T skill I haven't talked about yet does have some flexibility in terms of what people might prefer, but I've come to a pretty solid conclusion in terms of what's most valuable. First of all, I encourage Transcendent Power. Hyper Awakenings can be used in such a strategic way to quickly push very large portions of boss health bars, and amplifying that damage is, I think, very, very important when it comes to a DPS in almost any scenario. As for our T skill, while there is some value that you could imagine in reducing the cooldown of your T skill, our T skill, like many others, is on a pretty long cooldown, and while mana consumption and cast speed is nice, it's not as valuable as having good raid knowledge and holding your very high damaging spell for the time that matters and amplifying its damage. Additionally, when we're looking ahead to Bracelets and Belshaza, there actually, I would say, is one of the most interesting among different classes T skill comparisons available to us. Because while the one T skill that I use is primarily a damage nuke in our spinning or spiral arrow, when we look at the other options available for lock-on, which we'll showcase shortly, there are some really interesting things, like getting push immunity on cast, heavily reducing the cost and cooldown so it can be used more frequently, or giving you an attack speed and damage steroid every time it's cast as well, turning the T skill from something that does the damage itself to something that amplifies your damage on its cadence when it comes off cooldown. There is some interesting stuff that might be possible here.
Damn. Wait, so you'll
It's
be
not
able to
something that
cast a snipe and you don't get knock off?
Not quite. For this one, and I think it's worth jumping ahead to show off the skill,
Yeah.
it's when the skill is being cast. So we have two options for Sharpshooter for our T skills in Tier 4. Both of them are very interesting and cool, but one of them is the clear winner in my opinion. For the first one that's less appropriate for raiding and bossing, lock-on, we get a traditional archer slide, causing 3 arrows to spawn in the air, and after a delay, launching damage at the nearest enemy. So in a Chaos dungeon, that's pretty fantastic because it's a long piercing skill shot. But when we're thinking about a boss situation, this isn't the most attractive option to me because of the long delay for the damage to apply and the repositioning requirement of the spell on a very long cooldown. So while adding a reduced cooldown and granting push immunity to this is interesting, it doesn't fundamentally change the fact that you're just doing it more frequently, and in my opinion, doing less damage than your other options. Just to quickly talk about that though, the other option for lock-on is, again, to have an attack speed steroid granted to you and to have it deal more damage, have you deal more damage at all times. So again, in terms of potential, this is cool, but I don't think it's best in most raid scenarios. So after that, I could get a lot more attack speed, I'm doing extra damage, 30% more damage,
Oh
outgoing
wow.
damage. So again, it's substantial,
Right.
but when you see the next option that we're talking about, and if you compare the numbers, it's not even remotely close. This is looking at like maybe 200 to 300 million in my current setting when the all 3 arrows crit. If we compare that to amplifying the damage of the T skill that I use in almost every raid encounter,
Right.
Spiral Arrow, you'll see. I personally feel like it's just a no-brainer. Why this
That
is way
slaps.
more attractive.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
This can hit for 800 to 900 million if all of those ticks hit and the boss is staying in it. And that is just a huge damage difference for something that's on such a long cooldown that it makes more sense for somebody with raid knowledge to set that up to cast inside of an asteroid support buff window to make sure you're getting the most out of it, rather than sliding around the place. Again, it's stylish, it's cool, but for me, Spiral Arrow is the obvious answer.
You know, it's funny you say that. When you know, because I tested all the disc skills, and when I tried the sharpshooter, I'm like, this is the best one. But
Yeah,
that's my
it's
opinion. Everybody
pretty
got different
straightforward.
opinions, so which one is the best? But this one seems the
Yeah, we'll
coolest.
see. We'll see. With that said, that covers the leaps tree as well. And again, it's not too exciting when we get Braille bracelets, but I'm never gonna say no to more damage.
Yeah,
We could always happy to get that.
4%.
Okay, if we're thinking about skills, then there's two major sharpshooter builds for Death Strike that might be available to you with one major variation. I'm going to talk through first and foremost the one that I think everybody should be playing, which is incorporating Blade Storm into your skills. Now, let's actually start there, as again, it's slightly non-standard, maybe not the first thing you think of when you think sharpshooter, but when you're playing a Death Strike Sharpshooter, this spell is going to be really crucial to generating your meter and keeping your rotation going inside of this debuff, the faint note or the Death Strike window, as it was previously called. When you put a Wealth Rune or a Gale Wind on this, you can see two different variations, either getting more meter faster or spinning faster to finish the cast. I personally go for a Gale Wind. You're able to, again, almost generate an entire next
Damn.
bird cast just from this one spell. When you combo that with the rest of your meter generation spells, your Hawkshot, Deadly Slash, and Moving Slash, you're put in a position where you're able to really fluidly combo Silverhawk Assaults in between and on top of all your other spell casts. I think I'll save that excitement for when we do the
The
rotations
rotation. Yeah.
towards the end, but for now, let's talk through the other spells. Your Synergy spell on Sharpshooter is your Atomic Arrow. Probably one of the most annoying spells
Yep.
currently in the kit, as it's very slow, it's not very exciting, and it doesn't have as much range as I would prefer. But when you are using it, you want to be using it off cooldown and usually in between any gaps in your other spells, because of course you want it to be applying that synergy for your team and yourself, of course. I personally choose to use the long fuse tripod in the third row on Atomic Arrow by leveling this spell up to 10, as this extends the duration of the synergy application. Normally, when you shoot the arrow, it applies the synergy for 8 seconds, but you can see it extended back to 8 seconds there on its secondary explosion. That is because of the long fuse tripod. This makes it easier to keep the synergy up, meaning that a single cast has it going from 8 seconds to upwards of 12, 13. Taking a look at the other tripods going through skill by skill, on Atomic Arrow, there isn't much going on here as it's not a damage contributor for us, but we do take the synergy, of course, and then I personally take Flaming Gunpowder, as this applies a dot on the boss that can be used to track its movement when it's
Yeah.
moving or phasing invisibly.
Yeah.
Some people will take Enhanced Arrowhead for extra crit rate in certain variations of the build, but again, it's not a damage spell. We don't care if this crits. The tracking is more valuable to me. And again, if you are leveling it to level 10, long fuse is the no-brainer in my opinion, but there is a pretty justifiable option that you would take this down to level 7 for example, or even level 4. Just taking the synergy at level 4 and then leaving it down leveled would allow you to put other points into your other spell that you don't max for damage purposes. Let's talk about that spell next. Moving Slash is I think debatably one of the other most broken parts about playing Sharpshooter. Broken being some subjective thing, of course, but it's effectively a second spacebar.
Yeah.
It allows you to move a substantial distance, and it's a very fast spell as well that can be comboed with your spacebar for supreme mobility. I'm sure you've seen it either in PvP or from a skilled Sharpshooter player's perspective, but quickly covering a large distance
Damn.
can be really powerful in a lot of scenarios. And while, yes, you're burning your spacebar to accomplish it, this is a really powerful tool in the Sharpshooter's toolkit. Talking about runes and tripods, we take a wealth rune on Moving Slash as a Death Strike player because you want to have that ability to regain meter with it, and it is a very important part given that it's on such a low cooldown. A low cooldown that we further reduce with Quick Crep, and as I was talking about earlier, should you choose to down-level Atomic Arrow, you can increase Moving Slash to level 10, and you get another very powerful tripod in the form of Survival. This gives you status ailment immunity.
Right.
Full stop. You cannot be things like earthquaked or electrocuted during this spell cast. That's very, very powerful in several scenarios where you absolutely cannot afford to be, for example, earthquaked in Gate 4 Thamine,
Yes.
where you can't be cleansed, for example.
I learned this not too long ago.
Yeah, it's again very potent. You also get 30% dodge rate, meaning you have a 30% chance to completely negate any attacks that you would face. But as I've talked about a few times, I'm not a gambler. I prefer consistency. And while 100% status ailment is consistent, I prefer the consistency on my synergy over the potential get out of jail free card that Moving Slash has. I think that's one of the most controversial things in terms of which one you choose in the Sharpshooter toolkit. And an advanced thing I want to talk about right away when we're thinking about Moving Slash is the fact that, yes, it is a, dashing forward ability, but you dash forward and spin, meaning that for advanced Sharpshooter players, it's not just about moving into the boss with this spell, it's about repositioning around the boss. For example, if I want to get to the back to start using my Blade Storm, which has a back attack modifier, I can do things like Moving Slash behind the boss and still hit with both ticks of the Moving Slash, even though I didn't move into him. I missed it that time. And that time, I'm trying to really be cute about it.
It's not easy, though.
It's not easy on this big old dummy, Lunaris. He's got a bushy tail that makes it look like you're going to hit him. But again, to the side of him, while still hitting, is a really great way to get the benefits of generating the meter while still repositioning yourself.
Yeah.
Because, again, every millisecond counts when you're trying to be an effective player. That's taking it to the next level.
Min-max.
Moving Slash, one of your meter generation spells, means I think it's worth talking about the next meter generation spells as well. Let's look at your counter. On Deadly Slash, or for Death Strike rather, we take Deadly Slash because of its meter gen capabilities. There's another counter spell available to loyal companion players, but it's not really an option for Death Strike Sharpshooters because Deadly Slash is a substantial meter generator. We take a purple wealth on this one as well, and you can see that it generates a ton of meter. Oops, I have a resources applied. It generates a ton of meter if both of the hits land. I say both of the hits because we take it at level 10 and take the double slash tripod. This is one of the most important things. If you're not taking this at level 10, you're actually missing out on a ton of meter and your rotation will break down very quickly. It's important to level this to 10 and make sure you have this double slash enabled. In the middle, there isn't a lot of value here between Solo Performance and Sawtooth Blade. You get some extra crit damage on Solo Performance, which I personally take. But again, it's not a damaging spell. What's more important is your meter generation in the first row, and again, double slash. Now, in the old version of Sharpshooter, when we didn't use Blade Storm, and I'll come back to that variation after, it was very important to think about pairing these three meter generation spells in a specific way. Your Moving Slash has the lowest cooldown, meaning that you wanted to pair it with either a cast of Deadly Slash or Hawkshot. And to finish a quick discussion on Deadly Slash, it's your counterspell with deceptive range. Yes, it's a dagger, but the second slash extends pretty far in front of you. Meaning that it's I don't consider it a melee spell. It's a short range spell in the Sharpshooter arsenal. Like, I'm not standing close to this boss, yet this... Oh, too far. Oh, Still too far. But that counts as a counter. And in many scenarios, that's really important because both swings of the dagger also count as a counter attack.
Oh, the second one is a counter as well too.
This is true. And this means that in a lot of extended or very, precise counter environments, you're able to counter earlier than you would normally on other classes to start generating your meter while still making sure that the second hit counters as well.
Yeah.
Like some people in the past would describe this as a bad counter spell. I think it's
A great counter.
average or above average. I think it's quite strong and very good.
Yeah.
With that said, taking a look at the meter generation again for that pairing that I described, moving slash into deadly slash, full meter.
Yeah.
With these wealth runes applied and level 5 tripods. One more time, moving slash deadly slash, full meter. And the same thing is true of moving slash and hawkshot. Let's talk about hawkshot now. Hawkshot is a spell that was most recently added before Silverhawk Assault to the Sharpshooter arsenal, and it is really cool. You're going to be summoning a bird in front of you that travels forward, dealing very high damage and exploding in a large area if you take these tripods, the Red Hawk and the Solo Strategy. The tripods matter, and it comes back to why we focus on crit rate so much, as this being your third damage contributor in most fights, does so because of that giant 240% crit damage modifier there on the Solo Strategy at the bottom. You're getting outgoing damage from Red Hawk, which we take over the crit rate, because again, we're already fixing our crit rate in other places as a Death Strike Sharpshooter. We take the Silver Master tripod in the first line, because again, generating that meter is crucial to our success. And again, if we're pairing these spells, we'll have a full meter almost every time. It's again, you'd usually be casting other spells as well, but the key is that pairing is going to get you as close as possible. Something that's important to talk about with that little gap that you did see with the way that I have things set up is that I'm still using an old tier 3 bracelet that has swiftness on it. When we move to tier 4 bracelets, I'll finally be upgrading this to one that has spec instead of swiftness. And when you're really fluent in a class, 80 swiftness is noticeable. I notice when it's not there, but the trade-off for extra damage from spec will be preferred, and spec also helps us gain our meter faster when playing Sharpshooter. That's why the spec scaling is so valuable when it comes to min-maxing and try to become as powerful as possible. Now, with these 4 meter spells now described, I think it might be worth taking a brief detour to talk about that other variation I mentioned. Rather than Blade Storm in the past, we used to run Arrow Wave as our other damaging ability. Arrow Wave is a spell that I think it has a love-hate relationship for many people. Personally, I loved it. I enjoyed it a lot. It was a long-range spell that is still used in Loyal Companion. That hits 3 times, and again, it's really potent in terms of range and versatility because of that. You can cast it from a lot of places, but unfortunately, because of its scaling, even with these strongest tripods available, it doesn't do as much damage, and in the world of tier 4 Sharpshooter, even more importantly, it's not generating us any meter. We passively gain a little bit of meter in combat, but in the world where now this spell matters so much, this is no longer a viable option, I'd say, for most crit spec Death Strike Sharpshooters. As I mentioned, there are some variations that have more swift, where, for preference, you might want to try this out, but it is not performing better in any of my tests. Blade Storm, for sure, is the option that I go for. Again, taking Silver Master, Solo Performance for some extra crit damage, and then Blade Dance. Very important. There was a time when we took Shadow Dance. No more. This tripod's not used for anything. It's Blade Dance that allows us to spin, dealing extra outgoing damage. When we're thinking about the current version of Sharpshooter and why that's so important, we can at last finally talk about the other highlight spells. So I know you've seen it, you know it. You see Sharpshooters fail it and cry about it. It's Snipe. This long channeled spell is our hardest single hitting ability. And you might think then, oh, that must be our highest damage contributor. As I mentioned, because of the frequency of casting Silverhawk Assault, that's no longer the case, but it is still the highlight ability, where you are channeling it to hit a perfect zone to deal the maximum amount of damage. In terms of tripods that you're taking on it, you'll see that we have a cooldown reduction tripod that we take. We don't take push immunity on it. That is not, unfortunately, an option available to us when we have a gigantic weak point detection, outgoing damage, perfect zone tripod here. And then for Death Strike, we take a solo performance tripod, which you can once again see gives us a bunch of crit damage. Once again, reinforcing the reason that we don't want to be, skipping on crit rate. If I don't crit, it's very sad. It's very, very sad. Now, the last spell then that we haven't talked about, which is deceptively important to playing Sharpshooter well, is Charge Shot. Charge Shot is a spell that, per its name, can be charged up.
Right.
And launches arrows forward that detonate at the end in this configuration, with quick prep, double shot, which doubles the number of arrows being shot, and then fast fire, again giving us some crit damage and helping us, maximize the potential of this ability. The key thing about this spell and why it's important to master is that it actually has 4 hits in this configuration. There are the 2 arrows traveling, and then there's a detonation at the end, which happens from both arrows as well.
So, question with that: can you do if you do a tap release? Does it will do the same damage as like just holding the whole thing?
Exactly, and it does it in a fraction of the time, which is why it's actually crucial to maximize the damage of this spell to use it in melee range of a boss. If I tap it, we're seeing multiple hits.
Yeah.
All overlapping, as both the explosion and the 2 arrows are hitting the boss. Comparatively, if I just hit the side and have the explosion hit the boss, you're only seeing 2 hits, or, and I mean, it goes without saying, this also takes time to charge up.
Right.
You could also accidentally overcharge it,
and
you're only seeing 2 hits, but not the detonation. Compared to melee tapping it being ideal for 4 hits. The reason that this is very important as well is the cooldown of Charge Shot. It's one of our lowest cooldown damaging abilities, meaning that when cast at the beginning or early in rotations, it can often come back for a second cast before the boss leaves or before the end of your rotation completes. This makes it in my opinion, one of the differences between, again, really strong performing sharpshooters and less performant ones, is the people that use this spell off cooldown as effectively as possible. Using this off cooldown is as important as using your snipe off cooldown and actually hitting the boss with it. Now, a lot of people will be, concerned or confused about that last row tripod, fast fire compared to steady aim. Again, fast fire is giving us a bunch of extra crit damage, so it's definitely what I would strongly recommend to everybody. It's the strongest option of the 2. Whereas steady aim, it gives us some damage when you overcharge it, yes, but it also gives us crit rate, which is not what we want. This is a tripod that is more used on Loyal Companion, which we might touch on later, but it's not beneficial to Sharpshooter Death Strike because of the lack of crit damage and the longer application of it. For this one, you have to charge it up all the way to get the full value,
that's what you do.
meaning that if you were in close range and I tap it, that did 9 million damage.
Oh, wow, this is why.
You have to charge it all the way when using this tripod, and that's a long time.
Yeah,
that's a long time. That's wasted stats compared to simply getting all of the damage and more and quickly tapping it. When you're playing a rotation where you have 8 seconds to apply your damage, every movement counts.
Yes.
I say this as somebody that, as I mentioned, I played Death Strike even when it wasn't the new hotness, when Loyal Companion got its rework. I played it with Claymore Mine, an additional damage spell added to the mix.
Oh,
yeah. Everything inside that 8-second window. I guess to briefly touch on Claymore Mine, because it's an interesting spell that has some applications. This spell, when leveled up as a full damage spell, isn't, I'd say, the most potent. It's about as strong as Arrow Wave, but it does have high stagger, it has destruction on it, and it has some paralysis immunity as well, allowing you to, if you're hitting the head, do competitive damage. Whoops, wrong tripods. Or perhaps even no tripods applied to it. Solo performance, if you were taking this, mounting flames for the additional damage, and then concentrated storm for it to repeat 3 times. So again, it's about as much damage as Arrow Wave, and it does high stagger and destruction, so it's got some utility to it, but it's a little awkward to use, because again, you cast it, and it has 3 hits that have to hit, ideally, the head of the boss. Not exactly, a sharpshooter style spell,
Yeah.
but one that I used during the hard Braille era to try to get as much damage as I could when they destroyed my build. Okay,
Damn. What a
I think
tryhard,
we've
bro.
talked about. I mean, again, when you main a class, you main a
Yeah,
class,
yeah,
right? You
yeah,
take it to
yeah.
the extremes that you can. And I haven't actually said it about any of the interviews or discussions we've had so far, Mr. 4K, but I consider myself somebody that plays a lot of sharpshooter. There's
Yeah.
going to be people out there that know or perform in ways that are better than me. So, I always recommend testing things yourself with the
Right.
knowledge that you learn to make sure that it's working for you. Which, let's actually talk about that now. Now that we've talked about the skills, we've talked about the trees, I keep forgetting to talk about the engravings, which are pretty straightforward. There's not much room for debate in tier 4. Adrenaline. You need adrenaline to help you hit that 100% crit rate, as we've discussed so many times. Grudge, non-negotiable. Hitmaster is a very powerful non-positional spell, and we don't have any positional attacks that matter. Bladestorm does have a back tech indicator, as does Deadly Slash, but these aren't our primary damaging abilities. Yes, we level up Bladestorm all the way, and it's better to hit the back if you can, but it's not a priority. So Hitmaster's still very, very high value. Curse Doll, another great outgoing damage option that we want to be taking. And then Keen Blunt Weapon is still one of the most consistent damaging engravings that you can take, despite the fact that we have a lot of crit damage in our kit already. Even though we have a lot of crit damage already in the build, Keen Blunt Weapon does amplify all of our spells that don't have that crit damage, like Sharpshooter, which I forgot to talk about, and our Silverhawk Assault as well, which doesn't have built-in crit damage. So while you could do something like a Keen Blunt Weapon, a Stabilized Status, for example, if you wanted to chase a theoretical ceiling, I strongly recommend just taking Keen Blunt Weapon for its consistency of application and the consistency of damage you'll get from it. These 5 engravings, your combat engravings, are going to be what you're going to see most sharpshooter players running, as they're the most consistent, and as I've said many times, I like consistency. Talk about Sharpshooter. I forgot to mention the namesake spell on the class. The Sharpshooter spell fires a volley of arrows forward. We take Rapid Fire for extra attack speed and outgoing damage. Weak Point Detection for boss damage to push mean foes. And Focus Shot to further amplify that damage of the arrows that are going out. Now, if you're ever using this on mobbing, it does reduce damage if you're hitting multiple targets, but that almost never matters. And this is a decent range spell that, again, comes up pretty quickly and is our higher stagger ability. In a world in which mana wasn't as much of a concern, I'd actually take Overwhelm on Sharpshooter as well. Instead, we actually don't take Overwhelm runes at all in most builds these days because of the mana considerations of the build.
Damn.
But you used to take Overwhelm on either Sharpshooter and Charge Shot, or just Sharpshooter. These days, though, because we have more casts of Silverhawk Assault with a mid-high stagger rating, it tends to balance out. Let's talk about the rest of the runes, because I'm a little bit all over the place here, but want to make sure we round that out. We already talked about the wealth runes on our meter generating spells, and those are essential. Having these wealth runes and not having them at all definitely makes a difference. Even if you have to drop a purple wealth down to a blue or a green, it's going to be better than nothing, with the highest priority being your Hawk Shot and your Deadly Slash, in my opinion. And Bladestorm, like I said, you can get away with a Galewind just because you're spinning faster. And if you have more spec, as we do in Arc passive, it makes it more manageable. On our synergy spell, Atomic Arrow, this is where you might take a Purify rune if you desperately needed one, but this is where I put Poison over Bleed for a very small damage increase. And then on Charge Shot and Sharpshooter, I take Focus runes because the extra stagger would be nice, but not having mana is non-negotiable. You need that mana to play effectively. On our Snipe spell, it's a long channel. It's a tedious channel for many people. It's something that you have to get a strong feel for, and getting it off faster is super valuable. We take Legendary Galewind on Snipe as well. If you are running Arrow Wave or Claymore Mine, you might take either Overwhelm on Claymore, or Galewinds on those as well to make sure they cast faster. And if you were truly being very cheap, didn't want to use Mana Food, and wanted to go for max damage still, you could take more Focus Runes in place of any of these Galewinds, but I don't find that to be a worthy trade-off in most cases. Okay, that's tripods, that's runes, that's skills. Let's talk about gems briefly. So, Sharpshooter has the 5 core damaging abilities right now in Tier 4. You've got your Snipe, your Hawk Shot, your Charge Shot, and your Sharpshooter in that priority. With the exception of, again, the old days, Last Rush wasn't as important, but these days it's your highest damage contributor. Your Silverhawk skill, your bird, is going to be your most important damage gem, along with Snipe. If you're upgrading gems on a Sharpshooter, you'd want to focus on those damage gems. Additionally, we put damage gems on Bladestorm or Arrowwave, and a cooldown gem as well. So if you were swapping between Loyal Companion and this build, for example, you'd only be swapping these 2 gems in almost every case, Bladestorm over to Arrowwave. And for cooldown gems, we only need 4 other ones. Again, prioritizing Snipe, Hawkshot, Charge Shot, and Sharpshooter. And ideally, I'd encourage you to try to upgrade these cooldown gems in turn. Make sure they're the same level to make sure your rotation flows smoothly together.
Very
But a
important,
beautiful
guys.
thing about Sharpshooter is that they can be pretty low level gems. I've tested the rotation on as low as Tier 4 level 4 gems, and it still feels quite comfortable.
Yeah,
There's a
wow.
lot of waiting, of course, because you have to wait for the spells to come back, but crucially, you're still going to be able to cast them in the order that matters, which I think we're finally ready to talk about. Oh, the Awakening. The Awakening's the last thing. The Awakening is actually an exciting thing to talk about as well. So I'm a big fan of Goldeneye, a tornado of birds spinning around you and puts you in stealth, dealing damage in a vortex.
Oh,
It's a fantastic spell. It's a fast application, fast windup, and you can cast other spells after it goes off. That's my favorite spell in terms of the 2 Awakenings. Unfortunately, even though the Hyper is also extremely cool, the Hyper is less effective
uh,
as it is compared to its counterpart. So while Goldeneye is very cool, and the red arrows falling from the sky is definitely my favorite looking and feeling Awakening, every Death Strike Sharpshooter is most likely going to be wanting to run Fenrir's Messenger, because Fenrir's Messenger will also refill your Hawk meter. Whoops, I forgot to save. Watch the Hawk meter, refilled. This, in Windows where we're trying to get as much damage out as quickly as possible, means that it's actually just going to be night and day difference between, for example, quickly sending this out, sending your Awakening, rebuilding, and then sending another one right after. I'll actually demonstrate what I mean there, because you could even send it while you're fighting. So, Silverhawk, and another one, right away. So that extra cast is just one of those other examples, again, of how this is powerful, because you can cast it at the same time as other spells.
scary, scary.
Additionally, while the Hyper Awakening for Goldeneye is a stationary one focused on a single point, so you really have to time it well with your raid knowledge, this is a long-ranged ballista.
Right.
And when I say long range,
Boom.
I'm talking about
Oh, you can hit both
very...
snakes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Oh,
this
yeah.
is a both snake
Okay,
spell.
that's interesting.
I'm talking about very long range.
Damn.
This hits basically 2 screens, 2.5 screens. You're not going to miss this as long as you're pointing the right way and the boss doesn't jump behind you or something similar. Okay, so that's the straightforward discussion of the skills, the runes, the hypers. We talked about the drill arrow as well, which has a decently long windup and applies its damage over time. So you want to make sure the boss isn't going to jump out of it if you can. But when timed correctly, comes together for what I consider a really powerful package. We need to talk about the rotation now, because while Sharpshooter primarily relies on a priority system, that means you're casting your highest damage spells as soon as possible, which is how you'd reactively do the most damage in a real raid scenario. There is a technical best rotation, and that rotation is going to rely on the careful pairing of your meter generation spells with the casting of your other spells. And again, you're going to find other people that do things slightly differently here, but that basic principle will remain the same for everything. For me, that means that I'm always starting with your synergy, of course, applying your Silverhawk Assault, then Charge Shot. I start with Charge Shot again because it has such a low cooldown, At that point, I like to pair Hawkshot and Sharpshooter together, because their cooldowns overlap nicely when cast in that order and allow you to react to what the boss is doing. While Hawkshot locks in place the direction you're casting it once it goes off, Snipe, when I start charging it, I can react to the boss moving around, wherever he's going. And it's actually really fun to do that and learn the boss patterns to do that effectively. So, again, the first part of that rotation, because the rotation does change over several cycles, Synergy, Charge Shot, Hawk Shot into Snipe. And you can see the cooldowns aligned there. If you do it smoothly, they're almost identical. And from that point, you're probably looking to finish off regenerating your meter again. I'll do it again at full speed so you can see that meter again. The meter. And note, if you remember, because we're pairing a moving slash in there as well, which I used to get into melee range for the charge shot, you're pairing your moving slash and your hawk shot, meaning that you can send another Silverhawk Assault while you're sniping. So that's the first half of the rotation. That is, I like to do almost every time, as the highest burst, and it sets me up for the further success. If I have my T skill as well, I like to send my T skill before the hawk shot or before the snipe. In either case, I want the drill to be hitting as I'm channeling my snipe to make sure I'm getting the value of that delayed damage. So again, that's what that looks like if you have your T skill available. From this point forward, you're likely going to be using another moving slash and your sharpshooter. And afterwards, your charge shot is often going to be coming up shortly after as well. Let's add that onto the rotation. Oh, sorry, I misremembered. Not the charge shooter, your deadly slash. Your deadly slash is used at this point to get the last bit of meter after your second moving slash, because again, you're looking to pair those spells together. And the other crucial reason I do it in this order is I'm saving my counter spell to the end of the rotation. That means that the boss does something that's counterable during that rotation. And as a Hitmaster player, if I'm positioned at the front of the boss, ready to pull aggro away from my entropy friends, I'm in the best possible position to hit the counterattack when possible, while still not sacrificing any of the damage in my rotation. Let's do that one more time, adding in the deadly slash.
That right there is a statement, guys. That's GOAT. Only GOAT mentality understand that.
Moving slash, deadly slash, another Silverhawk's ready, and now it's finally time to use our lowest priority damage spell. But remember, it's not low priority in terms of damage for this contribution, just on its own. So again, if I'm using this from half meter, this will fill the entire bar on its own. Let's add that into the rotation now as well for our first rotation. And you can see I'm casting the Silverhawk Assault as soon as it's off cooldown. And now that we've cast all of our spells, our charge shot just comes off cooldown, ready to be cast once more. The important thing to note about, again, how this looks in Tier 4 compared to Tier 3, which we can take a quick look at, is that every time I'm casting Silverhawk Assault, it's reapplying the Death Strike window, the final mark debuff on the boss. This means that every subsequent Silverhawk Assault I cast within that window is also benefiting from the previous one. This is one of the differentiating factors between the skilled sharpshooters playing right now and those that are still learning. The number of times you can chain your Silverhawk Assault into the next one is going to be a substantial damage increase on this spell that you're casting so frequently that it overtakes Snipe. For that reason, you want to keep that going as long as you can, but as I've mentioned, the rotation does become a priority system, especially if the boss moves or I can't cast them as freely as I want, because you're not always going to be able to maintain that rotation. You'll see that here as we move into the second rotation of the cycle. That's one rotation. Synergy, Silverhawk Assault, charge shot, moving slash, and now we're waiting.
Yeah.
Pair it with hawk shot, snipe because they're paired together. Moving slash, deadly slash, sharpshooter, blade storm. Charge shot comes off cooldown. So you can see the order of the spells does change, but the pairing, hawk shot and sharpshooter, moving slash and deadly slash, moving slash and hawk shot, sharpshooter after hawk shot and snipe, and charge shot before them all tends to remain constant. The way that the cooldowns line up, if you think about them in that pairing, will allow you to do really significant consistent damage when possible. And you also saw that I did run out of mana after 2 rotations as well. So let's do a little bit of tweaking just for Trixion purposes to help us mitigate that a little bit. I'm going to throw on max MP at the maximum level. We'll put on Spirit Absorption to simulate Yearning. And this should help us out a little bit. And you may see me click the Recover Resources button as well to simulate what that looks like with a support and with mana food, as it's difficult to show off in Trixion. But one last time, the tier 4 Sharpshooter rotation. In an ideal scenario. You'll see these auto attacks come out frequently if I'm really in a high uptime situation like this.
Right.
And I'm doing that with level 8 tier 4 gems, and obviously you'd see it with lower, but you'd even see it with tier 10 gems, level 10 gems. Because if you're having this much uptime, you will have cases like this. Because let's remember, this isn't a real raid. He's sitting on the boss's ass the entire time. That's not realistic. It's much more likely that you'll be moving. Carefully casting your spells, repositioning, while maintaining the similar uptime. That movement capability of Sharpshooter, the non-positional ability of the class, is what allows you to do really similar to the damage that you're doing in Trixion in a real environment, a real raid scenario. Now, one thing to talk about in terms of all these spells that I haven't mentioned is Snipe. I kind of just breezed over it as an iconic spell, but you'll carefully note that when you cast Snipe, your character does a backstep from the direction that your cursor is facing. This backstep will get you killed. Or, if you're aware of it,
you do it the opposite way.
Really help you maximize things, such as a support that puts a Sunwell on the opposite side of the boss. I can backstep into the boss. Oops, I didn't do it there. In order to make sure I stay inside of a support buff. Or if there's a lethal circle behind me, again, you'll see good sharpshooters aim their snipe backwards to backstep towards the boss and then hit the target. That's a really important thing that people won't realize. You don't have to aim this where you're casting it first. It's extremely valuable to aim that backstep where you want your character to be. A really, really important skill to develop in the long run. So that's why I love a new version of Sharpshooter, even though I'm losing push immunity on this spell. It's so fluid and so capable that I'm able to deal damage in almost any scenario. Briefly, for those of you that haven't pushed to 1680 yet, let's take a look at even how this looks in the old variation with Last Rush. It's similar. In fact, when I knew that this was coming, I swapped from playing Arrow Wave Tier 3 Death Strike Sharpshooter to using Bladestorm back in July, because Bladestorm has always been a ceiling build, but it wasn't as much of a difference in Tier 3, because you were locked into this animation of casting the bird. I can't do anything else while I'm doing that, but we'll talk through it just for you folks, because I do still play a bunch of those Sharpshooters as well. Because you no longer have a single cast of this, you have to summon your bird first. You then have a Wings of Storm cast, which is your repress of Z. And then you can press your X. You need to do those in a very quick fluid motion. Because the first 2 presses are still a non-GCD activation, you can do them almost immediately. ZZX. The other thing that's important to note about this older variation of Sharpshooter, and something that really frustrated me because I learned it like recently this year, and I hadn't noticed how easy it is to make the mistake. When you have your meter just filling up as you are channeling your snipe, if you summon your Hawk too early before the snipe hit lands, you will actually lose your Death Strike bonus. Let me demonstrate that. So here, I'm channeling the snipe, and we can see the snipe does 267 million. Let's refund the cooldowns and channel another snipe. 162 million. Because I pressed Z as the snipe channel was finishing. And it's really easy to do this in scenarios when you're trying to string your combos together. So the trick that I'll offer to anybody experiencing that is when you are channeling the snipe and your activation is ready, rather than immediately summoning your bird for the next last rush, cast an auto attack after the snipe, and then cast your bird. You can do this to guarantee that you'll never lose the damage, because it's a huge difference whether your bird is summoned or not. And it's a why also in tier 4 you never have to worry about it, because your Silverhawk Assault never counts as summoning the bird, so you never lose your engraving
Oh, so
effect.
that's a huge deal, huh?
Yeah, and I know once I realized it was happening, I looked at 5 or 6 other sharpshooters, and I saw it happen to them every single raid. They'd be channeling snipe, and they'd
Yeah.
summon the bird too soon.
Damn! Wow.
Like even there, like it might not seem it might be hard to see, but like I let go of the button, but because I pressed this and it's an instant cast, the damage is gone. For me to make sure that I don't lose that, that's how long I have to wait.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's look at the rotation quickly in the old sharpshooter so you can see the similarities in case anybody isn't 1680 yet. It's very similar. You just have to push more buttons. And again, here, like I just said, you have to wait.
Wait, yeah.
You can't just cast your Silverhawk while you're sniping. You have to wait for the snipe to finish.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then you can continue your rotation.
Yeah.
Is every second or every first snipe,
Yeah,
you're going to see yourself losing damage.
Wow.
And just to reiterate, the reason I do still like the old sharpshooter is that this gives you push immunity. So the trade-off you get for not having this have no global cooldown is that you're push immune during the entire cast. And it's also a very flexible spell in terms of the explosion radius. You can use it from different angles, like I'm on the left side of the boss here aiming to the left, and it explodes on the boss. The reason being that, like many ranged skills in Lost Ark, the hitbox starts behind your character, so that if you're attacking something in melee range and you're looking to hit it in front of you, it will always hit, even if the boss is like on top of you. You can use that to your advantage for things like a con, any Medusa pattern, Echidna, a con. I can be looking away from the boss while still doing my full damage. You know? So there's lots of tips like that you can eventually lean into when you're playing Death Strike Sharpshooter that I really find, turn things from a reliable class that is dealing pretty good damage to a class that is one of the best in terms of feel and fun if you like using a bow.
Yeah.
Now, I think we'll pause there to see if people have any questions about Death Strike before I do like a 4-minute quick rundown of the differences with loyal.
You wanna leave the for the loyal companion maybe for another time, so we can do like a full loyal companion.
Yeah, if you'd like to, I could do that as well.
Yeah, because that'll be, I'm trying to do like 26 of the classes that and then because I'm pretty sure people are gonna ask me about the other spec, or the other engraving.
Yeah, most likely for sure. And again, I can't speak to everything, but if you want me to come back and talk about it, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to finish the 26 first, and then we just do like a second season type thing of the other 26. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
Hey.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. 4K. Are there any questions about Death Strike Sharpshooter?
Any questions, guys? Any questions? Yeah, like, you know what? So the main question for me was the one tap on the F your F skill.
On charge shot,
yeah, because I seen people like charging the whole thing, and I'm like, why are people charging the whole thing? I thought it was better to do like a fast release.
Yep, the name of the tripod is literally fast fire. You don't want to be holding it if you are using that tripod. You want to be tapping it immediately.
Yeah, that's way better.
You can see the 4 damage lines showing up when I'm doing this, compared to.
I think it will be situational to charge it, like if you cannot be close to the boss, and then right.
Absolutely, and it's actually one of the biggest QOLs we got about 3 patches ago, designed mostly for loyal companion charging rate, but it works for us too. If I'm in Thane line, he's doing normal red patterns,
and
there's a donut coming, I can space out and charge my charge shot still.
Correct.
And it charges very quick. It used to be very slow, but that charge rate now makes it very versatile. Oh, see there, I didn't charge it enough. I only hit the explosion, but not the 2 arrows. And there's the 2 arrows in white, and the explosion, which is the higher damage. 4 numbers. There you go.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Well,
anything else for right now?
Anybody got any question, guys? Yeesh, that's two back. LeBron James, que poderoso. Well, much love, Penny man. Really appreciate the fact that you take some time to help us with the guides, and you know they can count with me on anything, brother.
Thanks so much. Yeah, like I said, I'm cutting my playtime back a little bit for PoE these days, but once I get time to find some raids, I'd be happy to run with you anytime, Mr. 4K. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, take care, boss. Have a good one, man. Thank you again.
For sure. Take care. Goodbye.
All right. Jesus Christ. I gotta go back to everything again. I listened on the scouter, bro. Because on the scouter, I do the rotation a little different, but I want to make sure that I use the S 2-3 times on my rotation. Super informative. Indeed, I love it. Yeah, like the sharpshooter, cabrón. The other thing I was great too. Indeed, yeah. These people got so much knowledge, bro. SD, Jesus Christ. These people know too much about the class, bro. Hey, when you make a class, bro, it's completely different, huh? Another correct reposition with the search cannon to get the let's be on the front. Big knowledge, indeed. Yeah, this guy is pretty good, bro. He might high go, bro, the competition. Yeah, bro. Jesus Christ. They not making anything up. You get what I'm saying? They not making anything up, bro. Yeah. You think no, bro. I think both of them are pretty good, bro. I think they are slapping each other, bro. I think. Yeah, bro. Qué profesional, cabrón. Wait, somebody said the stupid's reacting to my video again, guys? Yeah, I think both of them were equal. I think both of them. Wait, is he? He was reacting to my video, guys.